Thank you for having me. I'm already lamenting having to follow Brad and his wedgies and innovative underwear. I'm hoping that you said something about conductive thread. Is there a bourbon conductive thread that you guys are working on that can maybe help me out?
Maybe we partner.
Okay, so we'll partner on that. But again, thank you all for having me. My name's Adam Johnson. I work for the Kentucky Distillers Association, the Kentucky Bourbon Trail, the Kentucky Bourbon Trail Craft Tour. We've been around since 1880, so we're one of the oldest industry associations in the country. I think we're older than 12 states, and our job is to preserve and protect Kentucky's signature bourbon industry. So, first thing I want to do is, if you are born in 1994 and after, just raise your hand with your cell phone. Okay, you have my permission to not listen to a word I say, as most of this will be for the adults in the audience. So feel free to just get on your cell phone if you're after 1994. But again, I just want to thank you guys for having me and appreciate your patience a little bit here. So I've got my first slide here. I took this at Heaven Hill in Bardstown. And I knew this conference was one of ideas, and I really struggled on how to tackle this broad subject. So I thought I'd bring some friends with me to help. And I might need some audience participation. Brad, get ready. I don't know if you can see these. This will be a little moral support. I think there's more.
This doesn't look good, man.
All right. That's pretty good. Okay, so I thought I'd structure my talk in a traditional bourbon tasting. You know, there's kind of 5 key components. There's the proof, and you got the appearance, you got the nose, the taste, and the finish. So, anyone care for a taste? So we got some youngsters that are way too ahead of the game. Well, we have a lot of enthusiastic audience members, but I think we'll let Brad here take us away here. So, Brad. Now, take your choice here, Brad. What are you thinking?
When I'm on.
And I'm here to direct you.
Okay. Test. You got me on? Is it on? It says it's on. Test.
Is there one you would like to try, sir?
It's up to you.
This one's mine.
When I told him that I would help him out, I'd never envisioned this happening. For sure.
Well, since the picture was up there of Heaven Hill, let's go with that. All right. So, we'll do this very briefly, very quickly. But here's some of Kentucky's finest.
Easy.
All right. So here we go. You're going to get a little information on the proof, right? You're going to study the bottle. It's going to give you a little bit of information, correct? So this is 86 proof. Now you want to hold it up and get a little sense of the appearance. Okay? The darker it is, usually a little bit older, a little more time in the barrel. So it's good information, particularly when you're able to judge up against some other products. All right, now take a little smell. Now try it with your mouth open a little bit. See how that changes it?
A lot, yeah.
That's good.
Very good, yeah.
All right, now the important thing, the taste. Go ahead. I don't think we're breaking any rules, are we? All right. So, and then you get the finish, right?
That's right.
Is it long? Is it short?
This one particularly long.
All right. Well, it's probably because you just spoke, right?
I'm not going to be able to drive home, I'm sure.
All right, so when we typically do this for educational purposes, thank you, Brad.
Thank you.
Everyone give Brad a round of applause. He has a very tough job. We do that for educational purposes, and you want to pick up the characteristics, the notes of the bourbon, and really kind of learn what you're tasting, learn more about the product, more about the brand. So that's really one of the fun parts of my job. I thought I had the best job in the world, but those Pixar guys maybe gave me a run for my money. But I think as I asked you all, anyone want to taste? A number of hands went up, and I think that's proof that the traditional moment that everyone enjoys about bourbon and the Kentucky Bourbon Trail Tour is the tasting, and that's no surprise. Everyone loves that. And we're seeing further proof into the industry numbers. So I'm going to put the in numbers a little bit, just bear with me here. But bourbon production has increased more than 120% since 1999. Roughly, they had about 455,000 barrels. We're now over 1 million, with premium small batch and single barrel brands driving the bourbon renaissance. Total bourbon inventory reached 4.9 million barrels in 2012, the highest it's been since 1977. This means there are more barrels of bourbon aging in the state than there are people, 4.3 million, and horses, which are 242,000 living in the Commonwealth. So U.S. distilled spirits exports topped 1.5 billion in 2013. Kentucky bourbon and Tennessee whiskey made up more than 1 billion of that amount, making it the largest export category among all U.S. distilled spirits. And Kentucky's bourbon manufacturers have invested nearly $300 million in capital projects in the last 2 years alone, from new distilleries and aging warehouses to increased bottling facilities and state-of-the-art tourism centers. So briefly speaking, what are we looking at with Kentucky bourbon and the Kentucky Bourbon Trail? I forgot my clicker, I apologize. Okay, real quick. I thought this was my chance. I was following this truck, and it left his door open by accident. I was ready to be opportunistic and seize one of those if they came out, but I was not quite so lucky. But why are distilleries investing so much in new visitor centers? First, I know you guys know what makes bourbon bourbon, right? Can anyone throw out some rules? Anybody? Help me out. Correct. Charred oak barrels. Anybody else? 51% corn. Keep it going. At least 2 years to be called what? Straight. Straight whiskey, straight bourbon whiskey. Now, someone said it's got to be made in Kentucky, right? That is wrong. But I want you to think that. That's fine. We make 95% of the world's supply, and the last rule is made in the United States. It is protected. Now, there's some rules about proof going in the barrel and off the still, but I think you guys have covered a lot of the big ones. And where can you best learn these facts and see bourbon at its source? Well, it's the Kentucky Bourbon Trail. We have 8 members that make that up. We have Evan Williams Bourbon Experience that just opened in Louisville, Jim Beam, Heaven Hill, Maker's Mark, which just yesterday announced their big expansion, Four Roses, Wild Turkey, Woodford Reserve, and Town Branch in Lexington. We founded the Kentucky Bourbon Trail in 1999. We kind of saw what some of the other tourism groups were doing, whether it's, you've heard of Napa Valley for wine and the Scotch Whiskey Trail. So we said, well, what do we have that they don't have here in Kentucky? And we started doing a little promotion, but we really didn't know what we had at the time. In 2007, we started the Passport program. That's the wrong one. The Passport program is if you go to all 8 distilleries, I send you a really nice T-shirt. With the first year we did that, guess how many people we had in 2007? We had 180 people do it, and we were thrilled. 5 years later, 6 years later, we've now had, in the last 2 years, we've had 30,000 people do it. So we've seen just crazy growth. Last year, we had 575,000 people visit one of our member distilleries. So we've seen just an explosion in growth. And people started wanting to do more. They said, we've done this a couple times. What else can we do? And we created the Kentucky Bourbon Trail Craft Tour. And last year, we had 100 people complete that, roughly, with about 60,000 visitors. And I hope you guys know, here's the passport for the craft tour. Bowling Green, proudly represented with Corsairs and right downtown. We also have Barrel House Distillery in Lexington, Limestone Branch in Lebanon, MB Roland in Pembroke, Old Pogue up in Maysville, Silver Trail Distillery out in Hardin, Wilderness Trace Distillery in my hometown, Danville, and Willett Distillery in Bardstown. So think about the cities that I just rattled off. I mean, that's almost the entire Commonwealth is represented with a distillery destination, and we've got several more on the way. So my boss one day, he sat down and he figured out that our growth has seen a 9,000% increase. I mean, it's crazy. So how did we get that? I think there's a lot of factors. Anybody here watch Mad Men? We call that the Mad Men effect. People are more interested in these classic cocktails. The mixology culture is huge. We've got a lot of help from our tourism friends. I think there is that shop local movement. I hope people are supporting their local distillery like Corsair here in Bowling Green. So I think that all that kind of helps, but I'd like to explore that idea of experience. I think we heard it with the Pixar talk of how important that sense of experience and providing that for our guests and how we try to capture that. I want to talk about a little bit. And I'd like to talk about how this experiential focus leads to the bigger idea of Kentucky bourbon, and I mean that in all caps. This is almost like my love letter to Kentucky bourbon. And then really the spirit of cooperation that in my mind is the biggest factor for our signature industry success. I think, again, we heard in the Pixar talk how much collaboration and how important that is. So with our bourbon tasting, you guys noticed the importance of nosing your bourbon. This picture is pretty important to me because I took this at Cox's Creek in Four Roses. It's kind of one of the secret stops of the Kentucky Bourbon Trail. And this is where they do all their barrel aging. Four Roses does things a little bit different in terms of spreading some things out. And I can just look at that picture and I'm immediately brought back to that smell. It was a bit cold out that day. We got to do everything. We got to bung a barrel. We got to dump a barrel. Just that smell. I mean, I could go on and on. And I just think it shows how powerful that sense of smell is. And that's just one of the senses. We also have, if I can get it to work. There we go. The taste, right? That was Brad's favorite part, I hope. So I talked about all these different senses, and really everything at the distilleries is geared to get all of that activated, all of that engaged. And I know some people think, well, what's super sexy about being behind a working factory? But there's really so much they do to get people engaged. How many of you guys have visited one of our distilleries? I hope there's a couple people. All right, good. So you get to do a little bit of everything there. You can dip a bottle at Maker's Mark in the gift shop. You can smell the mash tuns. You can see the hammer mill working on the grain. You get to hear the bottling line. At Town Branch, you get to see how they make a perfect Irish Kentucky coffee drink. You get to meet master distillers. I mean, there's just so much to do, and it gets everybody involved in the experience. And then the other thing that's really interesting to us, it kind of cracks us up, is you would think the tasting is everybody's favorite part. But in fact, time and again, in all this research and surveys we do, can you guys guess what the number one thing is that people like most about the Kentucky Bourbon Trail? I bet nobody guesses it. Meeting other people? It's actually the drive. Driving between the distilleries comes out time and again. Everyone is just blown away. 85% of our visitors are from outside the state. We kind of take Kentucky for granted sometimes, but when people come in, they're just blown away by the drive. And then the process, the actual scientific and the art of making bourbon really scores high. We spend all this money on these attractions, and it's really Kentucky is what people really remember most. But I do think it shows how all these sensory experiences can have such a long-lasting effect, and it creates new ambassadors and makes already dutiful bourbon lovers like myself more faithful when they visit our member distilleries. All right, the finish. All right, this is Brittany in our office. This was one of her life dreams was to be able to dump her own barrel of bourbon. She was very excited at Jim Beam to do this. And she always enjoys talking about it, just like I enjoy talking about any of the experiences I've had on the job or any of our visitors. So I could just bend your ear. I don't even know how much time I have left here and all the stuff that we've gotten to do. But if you take just us two, me and Brittany, and you multiply that times the millions of visitors that we've had, I think you can see what has helped kind of push bourbon on along a little bit. And these very stories create the long finish for our visitors, and they keep them coming back and spreading the good word. So as I wrap up, I think it's safe to say that most Kentuckians have thoughts on bourbon, no matter your personal level of enjoyment or your proximity to the industry. I know me, anytime I go into a restaurant, no matter where I am, particularly when I'm very far from here, I kind of look at the bar. I want to see if they've got some of Kentucky on that bar. I think a lot of people, they don't truly have that favorite bourbon. I mean, it's Kentucky bourbon. People ask us that all the time. I think they just ask me backstage, what's my favorite? And I always say Kentucky bourbon. just has a special place in my heart and everybody in the industry. And I think surely someone in this room, you know somebody that's worked at a distillery, for any number of years. On the tour at Jim Beam, they talk about a gentleman that has finally taken over a job after working it 30 years from his mother who had worked there 40 years. So that's very standard in our industry, and I think that's a testament to it. This year, Jimmy Russell from Wild Turkey will celebrate his 60th year at the distillery. 60 years. I mean, he's the master distiller. So, again, it just shows just the pride that people have in it. And I do think this culture and heritage is the key to Kentucky bourbon, and it's this communal sense of how special it is. And I think it's this love of Kentucky bourbon that has led to such an unprecedented level of cooperation within our industry. Where else do you see what should be traditional competitors working so well together? I'm proof of it. I'm hired by the distilleries all working together, whether it's the Kentucky Bourbon Trail or the Kentucky Bourbon Trail Craft Tour. These are all very different companies, big and small, working as one under the "a rising tide lifts all boats" approach. People see this idea when a distillery opens something new, and at that grand opening, you'll see members from all the other distilleries in the front row, and they're clapping the loudest. When another distillery has problems, the industry will help. We're working on this thing called the Kentucky Bourbon Tales, which is an oral history of all the members in our industry. And they all talked about the fire at Heaven Hill and how everyone really rallied together and helped Heaven Hill not miss a single day of production. We're also working on a really cool event in May called the Kentucky Bourbon Affair. Again, I keep coming back to the Pixar talk. It's about, let's do the wildest thing you can think of, and that's what we're doing with the Bourbon Affair in Louisville in May, where we're just doing the craziest things we can think of. Instead of just dipping a bottle at the gift shop, you're going to work on the line at Maker's Mark, and you're going to be able to dip a bottle. You're going to work in their sensory lab. You're going to go, everyone knows how Wild Turkey got its name. It was on this famous Wild Turkey hunt. They're going to actually let people go skeet shooting with Jimmy and Eddie Russell, and you're going to taste a product before anybody else comes out to celebrate Jimmy's. So that's been a fun project for me to work on, because it's been the crazier, the better the distilleries have been wanting to do it. But again, it shows this kind of cooperation that they have amongst themselves, all for the greater good of Kentucky bourbon. And I know this sounds kind of cliche, but I think it allows people to experience Kentucky more when everyone's kind of going in together in its signature product. And just I wanted to finish with what other spirit can people like Lenore Ely write? That bourbon elevates my thoughts beyond parsimony to see that in that sip of well-crafted and adequately proof bourbon, a non-instrumental world of value connections to my Southern heritage, to the virtues and the sins of my fathers, to the good earth from which the corn sprouts, to the flowing branch of crisp water, and to the ingenuity of man in discovering the art of distillation. It's rather, as Walker Percy put it, bourbon does for me what a piece of cake did for Proust. And as Walker Percy went on to say, the joy of bourbon drinking is not the pharmacological effect of C2H5OH on the cortex, but rather the instant of whiskey being knocked back and that little explosion of Kentucky, USA sunshine in the cavity of the nasopharynx. Now, I have no idea what a nasopharynx is, but that's kind of deep, but I like that. I think about that kind of stuff too, that little explosion of Kentucky, USA. Anytime I have a glass of bourbon in my hand, I think, what was happening 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 15, 18 years ago before that began its kind of barrel sleep and before I was able to sip on that little bit of sunshine. So I'd just like to end by saying we've really seen an unprecedented level of collaboration, working together, and I think by doing that, we're able to share the signature spirit with more Kentuckians, more bourbon lovers across the world, and I just hope I keep reading quotes like that down the road. So thank you very much.